Good morning, everyone, and you're very welcome to this week's Let's Talk Dairy webinar. As always, we're joined by a Grass10 team member. We've John Douglas with us this morning, just to give us an update nationally in terms of what's happening and maybe some of the top tips for the weeks ahead in terms of grassland management. We also have Liam McCabe. Liam from Board B is going to give us an update on the dairy market outlook for the remainder of 2023. So I suppose, John, without further ado, we had Joe Dunphy there for a couple of weeks. It was a tough slog on poor Joe in terms of the rain just seemed to keep coming. You're back now when the sun is shining. What's happening? How are things going out there?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's been it's hard to believe it was only 2 weeks ago that we were getting our last shower of heavy rain, so what a difference the last 2 weeks have been. And dare I say it, there's some people even hoping for another drop of it soon, because they're thinking, they're feeling the growth rates are going to slow down. But look, for most of the country, everywhere is absolutely flying now at the minute, and that is great for grass growth. And there's a lot of silage to be stocked back up in yards, and I think it's a great opportunity to get that back in, and get fertilizer back out in second coats and fertilize them to where they need to be fertilized, because we don't know what's ahead of us. And from what I've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, we don't know when we might need it, and it's to make sure that we always have that reserve. So that would be key. Keeping on top of the grass quality, obviously, we're keeping that 160 to 180 per cow, 6 to 700 of an average farm cover. That's what we're trying to maintain on that, and taking out, removing surplus above that. Now, I know not everywhere can be taken out the same week, so there's a little bit of chopping and changing to try and maybe graze the right covers. So we're still trying to graze those covers of 1400 every day. Every day we do that, it's more money in the bank for us as farmers. So that's what we're trying to achieve through that. The growth is well ahead of demand at the minute, so there should be surpluses on farms, and there's probably even a case some farms there could be reducing meal as well, feeding, because there's some of them are still feeding high levels of meal I've seen over the last week. But there's no need, because the dry matter in the grass is very good. We can open up, take down some wires, and let cows fill up on grass this week, because it's there for them. So they would be the main things. Look, grass quality on farms is a challenge. We've had grass that was grazed in February seems to be not too bad, although it probably was grazed during some rougher weather in April. But stuff that was grazed during March when it was wet, April when it was wet, that stuff is very harsh looking on the ground at the moment. Probably it really needs to be reset with a blade at some stages, ideally taken out as bales if we can. But look, it looks a little bit stressed in places. Okay, so you might get over some of that by grazing some of the covers a little bit lighter this time around, if you can get back to that stage. But look, it's going to take a few weeks, and if we're some of the time we're saying graze the best grass off those paddocks. Don't worry about cleaning it out, and hopefully on the next rotation you could take it out for bales either. So they would be that's some of the advice, is what James would be giving to farmers on the ground at the moment.
Yeah. So if you were to summarize, John, there, I suppose, in terms of, for our listeners, maybe the three key points for this week in terms of what they need to be doing.
Yeah, so probably measuring grass once a week is not enough. So you need to be doing at least one measure every 5 days or twice a week. That's what we're advising, because when growth is so high, we can't keep control of it. We can't just get into the right covers if we're only going to leave it a week between actually making those decisions. It's too long. So that's number one. And have a plan for correcting your grass quality would be the second one. So, take out some bales now. Take them out sooner rather than later, even where things are maybe starting to dry out a little bit. The sooner you get them out, the sooner it starts growing back again, and actually delaying it causes problems. But have a plan that maybe some paddocks could be taken out in the next round. We don't want waste and feed and topping and all around the whole round of the farm. That will slow growth down even further if it is happening on your farm.
And then probably the last one, as you say, in terms of get that silage cut if it isn't already cut.
Yeah,
Crops
get
are
the
going.
silage cut and get it fertilized again for a good second cut. Yeah.
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 Appreciate that, John. As always, thanks a million for the update.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
As I spoke about earlier, we have Liam McCabe on. Liam is the dairy sector manager with Board B. I think we'll have a lot of interest in this area, Liam. There's a lot of people listening and hoping that your conversation with me over the next 15 minutes is going to be a very positive one. But we want to maybe have a quick chat in terms of the dairy markets. I know it's titled in terms of where we're going for the remainder of 2023, but I think we need to have maybe a quick conversation, Liam, to start us off. 2022 record milk prices, everything, going into 2022, there was concern in terms of where input prices were, increased dramatically. Luckily enough, in terms of milk price, I suppose, as I say, increased to record levels, but there's been a big drop off since that, Liam. Maybe can you explain that? Because for farmers, it's a tough one. Prices have remained high, but milk prices dropped off dramatically in the first half of 2023.
Yeah, absolutely, James, and thanks for having me on. And as you say from the outset, we're acutely aware that it's something farmers are concerned about at the minute, and rightly so. There's been significant price decreases at farm gate level over the past number of months. I suppose what I'll try and do is outline the factors that may dictate where milk price will be over the next number of months, and I suppose explain the situation that led to maybe where we are today. As I always say, if I was fit to predict where milk price or where commodity prices will be, I'd be sitting on a beach in the Bahamas, not here in my humble abode in East Cavan. But look at it, as you rightly say, James, last year was an absolutely record year. I suppose in terms of global commodity prices, which obviously led to record farm gate prices, as we've seen here in Ireland. And not only that, but we've seen record Irish dairy exports as well, increasing by 32% last year to the value of 6.8 billion. So all unprecedented stuff that I suppose at the start of last year that nobody would have been in a position to predict. I suppose aware as well that all wasn't directly correlated to more money in farmers' bank accounts. They had to grapple with input cost inflation as well, as you pointed out. So really prices began to rise kind of mid 2020, following a bit of a shake that there was kind of at the onset of COVID. Since the middle of 2020, we've seen global commodity prices begin to rise. And I suppose looking at specifically at last year, what we've seen was and it really, although demand was quite robust, it really was supply driven, or lack of supply driven, that drove the prices to the high levels that they were at last year. So I suppose similar to what we've seen here in Ireland, James, where farmers, I guess at the start of last year, and in Europe in particular, farmers made strategic decisions. They heard all about these rising energy costs, etc. They made strategic decisions, and they culled some of the lowest performing cows. And as a result of that, in Europe, and similarly we've seen the same in Ireland, that milk production for the first half of the year was back. We've seen that kind of reflected across some of the other main dairy exporting regions as well. I suppose it's important to note that only 7% of all the dairy that is produced in the world is exported. So it doesn't take much to shift that balance, that the supply demand balance. It doesn't take a whole lot for that balance to be shifted. I suppose when we talk about the major exporters, there are kind of 5 key export regions that account for pretty much all of the dairy that is exported. They are Europe, New Zealand, the US, Argentina, and Australia. And if you look at Europe, the US and New Zealand, kind of all of those would have been back in the first half of last year, in terms of their milk output. So that, I guess, created this uncertainty in dairy markets around security of supply, where buyers were actually concerned that they were actually going to be fit to, fill supply lines, because all the talk was around this decreasing milk coming out of the major exporting regions. And as a result of that, drove prices to unprecedented levels. I guess what we started to see then the second half of the year, again, similarly to what we've seen in Ireland, farmers reacted to the high prices, tried to capitalize on them by pumping out more milk. Now, granted, some other markets have the ability to do that more effectively, I guess, than we do here in Ireland, because we're such a grass-based system. Some of the kind of higher input, higher output production systems were in a position to capitalize on that. And we've seen in the US, in kind of some of the key European markets, Germany, the Netherlands, they started to ramp up their production. And I guess we've seen the supply demand balance maybe take a shift as a result of that extra milk coming on board in the second half of the year.
So that's really, I suppose, where, okay, the high milk prices come out of, Liam, but ultimately in terms of the reaction to those has increased demand, has increased supply ultimately, and demand probably has tapered off. Um, where are we at now in terms of, and what a lot of our listeners are going to want to hear, has it bottomed out? What are the markets? What are the markets doing at the moment?
Yeah,
How is trade going?
I suppose what we've seen happening, James, was prices. So when I say price, I mean global commodity prices begin to decrease kind of in quarter 3 of last year. So we started to see that downwards pressure coming on prices. And at this point, kind of the core basket of dairy goods, as we call it, of butter, skim milk powder, whole milk powder, and whey kind of are back somewhere in the region of 40 to 60%. So we really did, and I suppose it was a result of our production system. We obviously have lower volumes being produced over the winter months in Ireland. We didn't see that reflected in at farm gate level until the last number of months, as farmers will be acutely aware of here in Ireland, as we've seen kind of the prices start to drop. So as I said, that shift in the supply demand balance created, it shifted the balance, I suppose, in favor of the dairy buyers as opposed to the dairy exporters, as it had been for the few years previous to that, really. So where we're at now, James, and I suppose I need to at this point probably mention China, who are, have a significant influence on dairy markets as well. They import about 20% of all the dairy that is traded globally. Last year, Chinese dairy imports were back about 20%. There was a lot of you were grappling with COVID lockdowns, etc. Now they have come out of those lockdowns. So there is an expectation that they will return to the market at some point, but I guess we haven't seen that yet. But in terms of prices, we have seen some green shoots in the last number of weeks in terms of prices begin to stabilize. So there is some hope there. I suppose that if we haven't reached the bottom, that we're very close to it in terms of where commodity prices are at. And now I guess what we still would be hearing is that there still is a price differential in terms of what dairy commodities are making relative to where farm gate milk price is at. So there still is a little bit of a gap there. But I suppose in terms of the markets, what we are seeing is that we have seen some stabilization over the last number of weeks, and there is hopes that prices have maybe hit the bottom. But I guess it's what you see as well, James. The summer can be a quiet period in terms of dairy markets, because a lot of parts of Europe just go on holidays for the summer, so we don't see significant change over the summer months. But as I say, there are some green shoots there that markets may have hit the bottom.
What sort of a lag period then, Liam, I suppose, in terms of ultimately the Irish dairy farmer wants to know, right, there's green shoots in the market, but is there a lag period in terms of where that actually starts to influence on farm gate price again?
Yeah, look, there absolutely is, James, and I suppose different processors will have different contracts with buyers in terms of how they're forward selling. So there absolutely is a lag. Now it's difficult to say; it's not a defined period as such, but there can be a lag there between where commodity prices are and where farm gate prices are. But I guess that's for the individual processors to manage that in terms of their what they have bought and sold, maybe in that context. But look, I suppose, as I say, there is still a bit of a price differential there, would certainly be what we're hearing in terms of what dairy commodities are making relative to where farm gate price is. So we would probably need to see some upward, certainly you would like to see an upward shift over the summer months, but as I say, it can be a quiet period in terms of dairy markets. Yeah.
Just to pick up on something you said a little bit earlier, Liam, in terms of obviously with the high prices last back end, supply was increased globally to react to those. Where, given the fact that it has such an impact on trade, where is global supply likely? I know it's probably a difficult one in terms of to pitch in terms of that lag when you get the information, but where is it working towards for the remainder of 2023? Is it ahead? Is it behind? How is it looking?
Well, Well, certainly for the first half of the year, James, the kind of key export region. So if I suppose we take New Zealand, for example, we just seen their April milk supply data in the last number of days, and they were up 6.8% in April. So if we looked at that last October, November, where New Zealand were just kind of crossing their peak milk supply, they were back 4% for their season. So when we talk season, it's kind of kicking off in July to May ballpark. So they were back 4%. Their cumulative season to date is only back 0.8%. So they have bridged that gap significantly over that period. Similarly, when we look at Europe, a lot of the European producers are there's more milk in Germany. France is back. The Netherlands is up significantly. So there is certainly excess. There's more milk in the first half of this year than we would have seen in the first half of last year. Now, I guess what the expectation is, again, in the reverse, I guess, of what we've seen last year, is that when the lower commodity prices is reflected at farm gate level, we will start to see a slowdown in milk supply, and it is anticipated that will come in the second half of this year. I suppose because of that lag in terms of getting the data, we don't have visibility of that yet. But I suppose what we have seen is that we are seeing higher cow slaughter in the US and higher cow slaughter in New Zealand. So that typically tells you that there's something happening in those markets. So I suppose for the first half of this year, we do anticipate that there will be, we will be in growth trajectory, but certainly by the time we get to Q4, we do anticipate that kind of those key dairy producing regions will have started to slow down at that point, tipping the balance, which obviously, has an impact on the supply demand balance. But certainly as we move towards the end of the year, James, we do anticipate that there will be less milk coming out of the main producing regions.
And you speak then obviously about stabilization in the market now, maybe over the summer months. Is it at that point in terms of Q4 where we may expect increases in the milk price received at farm level?
Look, that's a difficult one to say, James. I would think so. I suppose markets haven't signaled anything significant yet to say that there's significant optimism out there per se. But I suppose what we are seeing is a stabilization in markets, which I think is a good thing, because we know that that's how dairy markets work. So let's see. Hopefully, I mean, that's generally how the cycles works, James. Is that there's less milk, and as a result of that, the supply demand balance is tipped in favor of the exporters, and prices begin to rise again. So I suppose that is the expectation, that we will see stronger prices as we come into the end of the year. Now I know that's maybe little consolation to Irish dairy farmers as we're crossing peak at the minute, but that is the hope, is that as there is less milk in global markets, that we will see stronger prices. And at this point, we're almost at the midpoint of the year. We're looking at Q3 and into Q4 for that, I would expect.
Okay. There's a question in there in terms of, I suppose, how did Irish farm gate prices compare globally or even across the rest of Europe last year? Did we get all we should have got, type of thing?
Yeah, look, I'd say, James, we've seen similar enough price fluctuations across the kind of key exporting regions, if you like. Certainly across Europe, we would have seen similar enough farm gate, that kind of relative change across the kind of key producing regions as well. Similarly, New Zealand, I know I'd say they seen the price fall a little bit earlier than we did, simply probably due to our supply pattern, that they had more milk kind of last, as they were crossing their peak last back end, where we were actually going the other way. So I'd say, because of that switch, in terms of, even if we take ourselves in New Zealand, they would have had seen lower prices before we did. So you're not always comparing like with like, but in general, James, I would say that the prices were reflected kind of across the major exporters. Yeah.
The final question I see in here, and it's probably it's the crystal ball one, and maybe if you do answer this one, you'll get that break to the Bahamas, Liam. But we've a question in from a viewer in terms of where are you pitching farm gate milk price over the coming months? Obviously, costs remain relatively high. I know there's an easing in maybe fertilizer and feed, but there's been a lot of stuff fed and a lot of fertilizer purchased at relatively high prices in the first half, Liam. So input prices for the year probably aren't going to
Yeah.
drop off an awful lot. Are you going to give us a figure?
Yeah, look at I won't be giving a figure, James, because I don't know it, and I don't think anyone with and it's not to being dismissive, but it's as you said from the outset, it is crystal ball stuff at this point. But I suppose when we look at the fundamentals and in terms of the prices as well, the signals that we're getting, there is some green shoots there. As I say, the prices have begun to stabilize. So, we would hope that prices in terms of global commodity prices have hit a bottom at this point. And I suppose from here, we would hope that as we move towards the end of the year, that they will begin to move upwards again. So, as I said, difficult to put a price on it, James, but in terms of, I suppose, hopefully farmers can draw their own conclusions at what we can expect to happen maybe as we move into the end of the year. We would hope that obviously with less milk coming out of the major producing regions, that we see higher commodity prices and as a result higher farm gate prices as well.
Yep. I think we leave it at that, Liam. And I want to thank Liam McCabe from Board Beer for coming on. I think it's obviously a very topical conversation at the moment, Liam, as I said, and in terms of farm gate costs remaining high, it's something that, as you say, each individual needs to have a look at their own system. They have to draw their own conclusions on your conversation today, but also in terms of having a look in terms of where the cost structure for their farm is over the coming months and for the remainder of 2023. So as always, Liam, thanks a million and thanks for your time. Thanks for your update. The weather's good, folks. There's a lot of silage going on out there. What I would say is, as always, farm safely over the next week. We have Larkin Dooley, local Teagasc advisor in Portlaoise, with us next week in terms of giving us an update as to what's happening on the ground with his own farmer clients in County Laois. So thanks a million, folks, and see you again next week.